Let's get started here. My name is Don Leinbaugh, and I am the Dean of the School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation, and it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome you all here for our symposium today, Why is Social Housing Critical Today? Here at MAP, Maryland's Built Environment School, we're dedicated to making places livable for everyone. But in the U.S. right now, we face significant barriers to realizing this goal, particularly in terms of housing and housing quality. I had the great privilege recently of meeting with the U.S. Surgeon General, Vice Admiral Jerome Adams, who is our highest level federal official on public health. And Admiral Adams said to me that he thought that housing quality, housing equity, and housing safety were critical public health issues in the United States, and charged us as built environment professionals to take that important message and work to improve the quality of housing for all. So I think I'm extremely excited to hear the speakers today talking about this. I think we have a wonderful exhibit on social housing from Vienna that we're going to hear more about here, and then I hope you'll visit today in the back. I have a special opportunity to welcome and to thank our guests. We have a delegation here from the city of Vienna. Kurt Sturzenbecker from the city of Austria, who is a council member. He's chairman of the Committee on Finance, Economy, Digitization, and International Affairs. Kurt. Michael Stangl, who is Deputy Director of the Vienna Housing Agency, Wiener Wohnen. Josef Chair, incoming Director of Wohnservice Wien, which is the organization for housing issues in the city of Vienna. Josef. And Katharina Bayer, who is an architect in the city of Vienna and a partner in her firm. And then finally, Christian Shanti from the city of Vienna. From the Austrian Cultural Forum at the Austrian Embassy here in Washington, D.C., Eva Schoenfer, Director. Birgit Wittemwas, Deputy Director. And Katerina Predona, who is the intern. We also have partners here, both from Montgomery County Government and from Prince George's County Government. Can I ask all of them to stand briefly and be recognized? Montgomery and Prince George's County, please. Welcome to all of them. And I think in particular, those two counties being our partners on the Purple Line, we have a lot to talk about in terms of housing and quality affordable housing as the Purple Line comes to us here on campus and in our counties. So, quickly on the schedule today, we're going to start with a lightning session called Why is Social Housing Critical Today? And that's going to be followed by 3 sessions. The first is past and present social housing in Vienna and the United States. Second is the intersection of finance, policy, and planning lessons from Vienna. We'll have a coffee break, which is generously sponsored by our partners from Montgomery County. And then we'll end with a session called Design, Case Studies in Social Housing and Urban Design. I would note that at the end, we will have a reception out in the Keibel Gallery at the outside of the auditorium, and that's being sponsored by the school and by the Austrian Cultural Forum, and I understand we're going to have some special treats to partake at that. So please join us for that. Two other quick announcements. Tomorrow, Saturday the 14th, there's going to be a community conversation that Montgomery County Council member Hans Riemer will be hosting at the council building in Rockville. And then on Monday, September the 23rd, Professor Emerita Isabel Gournay will be giving a gallery talk titled Red Vienna's Housing Program, Practical Lessons, and Living Legacy. And that'll be here in the gallery. And with that, let's move to our lightning round, or our lightning session, okay? And our speakers again will be Hans Riemer, Montgomery County Councilman, Chair of Planning, Housing, and Economic Development for Montgomery County, Danielle Gleros, Prince George's County Council Member, Michael Stengel, Deputy Director Wiener Wohner, Joseph Chair, Incoming Director of the Vienna Organization for Housing and Housing Issues. So please come up and join us.
I think you'll be there and we'll take turns from the dais. Hi everyone, I'm Hans Riemer and I am one of the 4 at-large members of the Montgomery County Council, and I'm in my 3rd term at the County Council. Anyone here grew up in Montgomery County? Show of hands. All right, good. Like that. Thank you for being here today. I chair the Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee, and I am really, really pleased to be here today to join you in learning about this remarkable policy in place in Vienna today. I want to welcome the delegation from Vienna and thank you to the University of Maryland for hosting this exhibit in the Kibble Gallery and the School of Architecture for hosting our symposium. The Washington region needs more housing to serve households at all incomes. Housing is the basis for thriving communities, for a diverse and growing economy, for opportunity for future generations. While Montgomery County has a long history of working hard to provide a diversity of housing and making sure that we are building affordable housing in all parts of the county through inclusionary zoning, we need more housing, and we need it to be in vibrant, diverse communities that are walkable and have access to transportation. Having Councilmember Gleros and Assistant Secretary Heckles here today, along with participants from Montgomery County, couldn't be more timely. The development and opening of the Purple Line is one of the most exciting infrastructure projects in decades. It will dramatically change how people travel within Montgomery County and from Montgomery County to Prince George's County. It will energize our regional economy. In July, the Montgomery County Council's Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee, which I chair, was briefed on the Purple Line Coalition Corridor's development of a housing action plan that should be completed late this fall. I know Councilmember Gleros is very involved in the work. We were told that preliminarily, 19,000 housing units across the Purple Line Corridor should have regulation or protections and be affordable to households earning about 60% of area median income. Currently, the housing plan team estimates that across the corridor there are about 8,500 units with these same protections. Yesterday, the Council of Governments released its recommendations and housing goals for the region. At least 320,000 housing units should be added in the region between 2020 and 2030. That is our need. At least 75% of all new housing should be in activity centers or near high-capacity transit, according to the regional governments in the study. And at least 75% of new housing should be affordable to low and moderate income households, middle-income households. The Urban Institute recommends that 38% of housing be priced in the lowest cost band that has a maximum of $1,299 per month rent. In Montgomery County, we already have a lot of tools to produce affordable housing. Just a few of them include over $65 million in new operating and capital funds annually in the County Housing Initiative Fund, over $28 million in tax relief for affordable housing through payment in lieu of tax agreements, a waiver of impact tax worth millions per project for developers that commit to at least 25% of their units in our set-aside moderately priced dwelling units program. But none of this is enough, and money alone does not guarantee the creation of exciting places to live. and development that is conscious of energy efficiency, transportation, and innovative design. When one of our residents, Pam Lindstrom, who is here today, told me about this fabulous exhibit on not just the history of Vienna social housing, but what is continuing to happen in Vienna today, I thought there could be much more that we could learn. How can we move away from the negative views people still have about subsidized housing, especially when a majority of households are housing cost burdened? Wouldn't it be wonderful to have neighborhoods excited to know that more affordable housing units are coming to their community? How can we build at a faster rate and make sure that we have high quality development? What can we learn from the competition that Vienna uses to create these extraordinary developments? What can we learn about Vienna's smart city framework with its emphasis on green spaces, recreation, renewable energy, and public transportation of all modes, including walking? I'm also eager to learn more about how projects are financed, particularly in the public-private developments, and how the rents are set and maintained. Vienna is consistently highlighted as one of the most livable cities in the world, and congratulations to our Viennese officials for that achievement. I want to again thank the Vienna delegation for sharing this exhibit with us and providing insights into your city's long commitment to affordably housing all of your residents. And I'll close with one concept. To me, social housing is a social insurance policy model. It is the social security of housing policy. It is a policy where everyone pays in and everyone benefits. The middle class is provided housing through this program. We created a similar program for retirement security. It is the Social Security program. Perhaps it will be the next generation that brings that kind of philosophy and strong policymaking to housing. Thank you for your time and participation today, and I look forward to the dialogue.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm County Councilmember Danielle Glarus, and it's an absolute honor to be here today at this symposium. For those of you who don't know me, I represent District 3 in Prince George's County. You are sitting and residing in District 3 today. You're in the westernmost part of my district that spans all the way out beyond the New Carrollton Metro to the Glendale community. And I'm in my second term, and as was mentioned earlier, both Hans and I share similar roles. Him as Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Chair over Montgomery County, and myself, the same role here in Prince George's County. I'm also honored to be one of the council members who represents the communities along the Purple Line route. So if you've driven through Prince George's County at any portion today, you know we are heavily under construction. Every day we are more under construction, and 9 of those 11 stops in Prince George's County, 9 of the 21 across the entire route sit and reside in District 3, the district I represent. And I share all of that to give you some background to how I think about housing and how I think about community and economic development. But before I go further, I just want to thank our Austrian delegation for being here today. I have to say I was so lucky and blessed to be here a little early to be able to pop into the exhibit. Because it is a pretty phenomenal exhibit that's been put together. And the model that you have in essence had in the works for nearly, I guess about 100 years now. You're almost celebrating the 100th anniversary. And in particular, it looks like the last 50 years in particular, that has been even more of a focus. It really lays some important groundwork, I think, and ideas for us here in this region to think about as we tackle the needs of housing. And yes, it's affordable housing. It's also housing for middle-income families, also something that your nation has understood incredibly well. And I was really struck by some of the lingo in particular in the exhibit that I'll mention in particular, but one is gentle urban renewal. As people here in the Washington region, particularly in my community actually that I represent, including the Lakeland community here in College Park, urban renewal is not a positive term in the United States, particularly from our communities of color. And so I'm very fascinated by the use of the terminology gentle urban renewal, which I think speaks to the pace of the change and the opportunities, as well as the focus on place. The idea is not just about building a building. The idea is about building a community, a neighborhood, a place. It's centered around place. It's not just centered around the structure. And there's a lot more I'm sure we will all take away today from the symposium. Let me talk a little bit about Prince George's County. As many of you know, we are in a massive region here in the Washington, D.C. region. Prince George's County is, I think, unique amongst the jurisdictions in this region. We're unique in a few different ways. We're unique because we, in general, are in a different place, I think, as we have had this conversation about housing. Oftentimes, in Prince George's County, we thought of ourselves, and we still think of ourselves as sort of the affordable housing community in the region. It is a fair statement to say that. Our average median income is around $81,000. The region's around $120,000. The median household, if you're going to buy a house, it's around $300,000 in Prince George's County. It's pretty much twice that almost in any other jurisdiction around us. So the differences are there in terms of how we think about housing in Prince George's County. But I'm also part of a council that has embarked upon a very important dialogue over the last few years to change that conversation about how we think about affordable and workforce housing, how we think about low-income housing, and how we think about housing for actually all of our income levels here in Prince George's. We actually just earlier this year, end of last year, put together a comprehensive housing strategy. The first time the Prince George's County has put together a comprehensive housing strategy. Today I chair a comprehensive housing strategy work group that's meeting very regularly to put forward policy ideas as well as budget priorities for the upcoming 2020 session here in Prince George's County. So we're taking a very different look and a very different approach about how we need to think about it. Because whether you're living in Prince George's County or Montgomery County or DC, our residents are also cost burdened, just like residents are in Montgomery County. And at the end of the day, a community is just not made up of people who happen to be working in one place or the other place. It really is a community that provides housing types for all of the residents in that community. And that's especially the case in the communities I represent here in Prince George's County, where we're seeing some dramatic investments in infrastructure. And so as we see those investments in the purple line and infrastructure coming on, we're really committed to making sure that the communities benefit from that investment, that they live there beyond that investment that's coming into the communities, and that we really are building mixed income communities, because at the end of the day, mixed income communities will provide best for our long-term economic needs in the county or in the region itself. So with that, I just want to thank you all for coming together for this really important symposium. We are having a lot of dialogue about housing, not only in our county. Hans Riemer mentioned the conversation that the Council of Governments is having as well, and I'm sure if you picked up the paper or watched the news this week, you saw that conversation in there as well. So once again, thank you for having me, thank you for hosting this event, and I really look forward from learning today from this model and this opportunity as we together move this conversation forward, because it will take all of us to sort of think of this conversation in a different way and approach it in a different way than we have in the past. So thank you.
Does it work? Can you hear me? Yes? Dear Mr. Renewal, dear Mr. Riemer, dear Mrs. Claros, most distinguished guests. I'm very happy to be here in Maryland, and I'm very happy that so many people came to this invitation and are interested in social housing. I didn't believe that that so many people will come, and so I'm very happy. I'm very happy about the invitation, and I thank that this for this invitation for our delegation of Vienna, and as a representative of the city of Vienna, I would like to convey the best wishes of our mayor, Michael Ludwig, and our city councillor for affordable housing, Katharina Gahl. and we are very proud that we have the opportunity to discuss here the theme social housing, because I think it's very important that we have exchange from knowledge in several fields, and in several fields it's sure that we can learn from the United States of America, and perhaps in some fields the United States and their representatives can a little bit learn also from Europe or from Vienna, and I think social housing is here a very good field where we can discuss. I would say that we are all in Vienna very proud that Vienna has been elected year by year in top position in various competitions like Quality of Living Survey from Mercer Studies, or the Global Livability Ranking from the Economist Intelligence Units. And we are convinced that one of the main reasons, we were there 10 times first by Mercer and twice by economists. Those were the first place from more than 200 big cities, and personally very modest, yes. But it's not necessary to be modest for a city where many people, many thousand people work for a good conditions of living, and so we are convinced that one of the main reasons for these high rankings is our housing situation. You do not know about if a Viennese person is rich or poor due to his or her address. Yes, we are very interested that we have a social mix in the buildings, but we have a social mix also in all districts. We have in Vienna 23 districts, and we have in all districts persons of the middle class, more or less poor people, but they are not very poor, I must say, and we have rich people too, yes, but they are all mixed in all districts. Sure, 2 or 3 districts are more rich, and in others perhaps less, but very important is this social mix. The international comparison confirms the uniqueness of Vienna based on its high quality of living and housing, as well as its social diversity. A key contribution towards this goal is made by a social housing policy that defines housing as a service of general interest. That's very important. Service of general interest, and Vienna's strength lies in the consistency of its housing policy, which is also reflected in the city houses housing market. And around 45% of the housing market is composed of subsidized and municipal housing, and this segment, characterized by affordable rents, is home to more than 50% of Vienna's population. That means we don't have 50% or more poor people. That means that the social housing in Vienna is for the more or less poor people, but it's also for the middle class. It's also perhaps for the higher middle class. Only the very rich, they don't want to be there, and it's not necessary. We see housing as well as other services for the public, like public transport system, the water supply, or the waste management as a basic human right. That's the very interesting sentence. That is why Vienna invests each year about $400 million in housing construction and restoration of older buildings. Another $100 million and $10 million are dispersed to individuals who are unable to afford even subsidized rents. We try our best to prevent gentrification and ensure a stable social mix in the city in general, and also within every individual apartment complex, because that is the best guarantee for good and peaceful neighborly relations. You will therefore not find any no-go areas in Vienna. There is no no-go area in our city. This is only possible because we provide the middle classes with access to affordable housing, where we have a net rent of $5 to $6 per square meters. This is the reason why we have higher income limits for the allocation. We have high income limits for those people who want to go in the social housing, because then the middle class is there too. For many years, Vienna has shown how important it is to ensure stable prices by smartly combining land procurement, diversified subsidy system, tenant protection, and tenant participation. Wherever it is possible for us as a city, we aim to create a positive impact on rents. In the framework of our housing initiative, we have launched thousands of new subsidized apartments. We have also adopted legal regulation stipulating, it's a little bit complicated, a new land use category to dampen land prices and real estate speculation. This means that 2/3 of every large housing project must consist of subsidized housing, and only the rest can be privately funded. In this way, we guarantee that housing remains affordable for the Viennese. This is only for new land of this category. Yes, for the old category, it's not. But Vienna housing policy is also has also other major key impacts. I say it because my time is short. It gives social security and financial predictability through tenancy agreements of unlimited durations and affordable rents. Unlimited duration is very important. Yes, in the private rents, we have more than the half limited rents, and that's not good for the people. After 3 years or 5 years, he has to go out, or he has a very higher rent. Yes, but in the unlimited duration, it's only possible to hire it according to the inflation. Then our system, it supports social cohesion through communal areas as well as facilities and initiatives which promote a sense of neighborhood. Neighborhood is very important for us. It increases quality of life, a reduction in energy, very important now in the energy crisis, consumption, as well as the upgrading of the older districts through subsidized regeneration projects. It creates 1,000 jobs. It is the basis for a good social mix in the city, I have already said. It prevents segregation. It also prevents price surges. Rents develop only in line with the communal price indexes. This is only for the social housing, I must say. Yes, the private rents have not this regulation. And with environmentally sensitive construction methods, we create a healthy living environment. So I want to say my last sentence. So the mix of various measures, from guaranteeing a social mix, the fight against speculation and gentrification is very important, the creation of thousands of jobs, the upgrading of neighborhoods, and better preconditions for smooth living and working together in the city. All of these are key effects of the social housing sector in Vienna. So I thank you once again for the invitation, and I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you very much.
Can you hear that? Welcome, everyone. So this is our first panel of the day after the lightning round. I'm particularly interested in hearing what our panelists have today to say about the past and future, or the past and present, I guess is the title of this, of social housing in Austria and the US. And I actually wanted to start this morning with quotes from last night's debate about housing, but there were none, there were no questions about housing, so sort of took that piece of my talk away. Even though 85% of Americans actually think this should be a top priority. So that's another day, another discussion. But I thought it would be helpful if I say a little bit more about this term social housing. Before today, how many of you have heard this term, social housing? It's actually more than I thought. Maybe you sort of did your research before coming here, so that's a good job. Well, I think it's fair to say social housing is a term we don't use a lot here in the U.S. Social housing is more commonly used in the European context to describe housing that's made more affordable through some sort of government action, typically government ownership and management of housing, but also government subsidy of nonprofit and cooperatively owned housing. And really the closest thing we have in the U.S. we call public housing, but there are some important differences between public housing as we understand it and social housing, at least as it's understood in the European context. First of all, less than 1% of the U.S. population lives in public housing, and more than 60% of Viennese population lives in social housing. And since the 1990s, public housing, which is really primarily geared towards the lowest income Americans, has been rapidly disappearing due to various public and private redevelopment initiatives, including many sponsored by the federal government. The most common form of housing subsidy for low-income people in the U.S., for the federal government anyway, is actually a tenant-based rental vouchers. Simply an income subsidy that's used to offset a portion of rental costs. And then in some states like California, actually just this previous week, are starting to enact rent controls is sort of now in the debate as well. So this debate about whether social housing would work in the U.S. or something like social housing is really a debate about the appropriate role of government in housing markets, paying particular attention to those who are unable to afford private market housing. And I particularly liked Hans Riemer's discussion of sort of equating social housing as a form of social insurance. And I think that's a nice way to think about social housing in Europe, and also a nice model for maybe the way we want to think about it here in the U.S. Just one more thing to say, I think this is a really important conversation that we're having, because these kinds of conversations were also the same conversations that led to the New Deal era housing apparatus that's still with us today in the public housing program, which is a part of that. Hilliard Robinson, for example, was an architect who designed Langston Terrace in D.C. as a public housing development. Actually looked to the Karl Marx Hof in Vienna as a source of inspiration. And those of you who know Catherine Bauer, who's an important housing advocate in the 30s and here in the U.S., actually her advocacy led to the public housing program that we had. She looked to the Karl Marx Hof and to Viennese housing as a model for what she described as modern housing, was sort of her vision for social housing in America that really sort of never came to fruition. So we have four distinguished panelists today who will provide a comparative and historical overview of social housing in both the U.S. and Austria, drawing primarily on examples from the D.C. region and from Vienna and Austria. So our first panelist is Michael Stengel, Deputy Director of the Vienna Social Housing Company, Wiener Wohnen. and he will place Vienna's social housing strategy into an historical context. Joseph Sayre, incoming director of Wohnservice Wien, a major housing organization in the city of Vienna, will give an overview of the motivation, working principles, and challenges of Viennese social housing. Our own Willow Lung-Amam, an associate professor of urban studies and planning here at the University of Maryland and director of community development at the National Center for Smart Growth, will discuss affordable housing programs in the DC region, emphasizing those that aim to promote racial and economic inclusion. And then finally, Casey Anderson, chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board, will discuss the factors influencing housing costs in Montgomery County, Maryland, and we'll also talk about the county's innovative affordable housing programs. So maybe we start with Michael.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. Nice being here. Vienna is the rapidly growing capital of the Republic of Austria. It's known for its culture, its hospitality, as well for its high level of social stability and, of course, for the outstanding quality of life. One indicator we've already heard about is that every year since 2008, we have been awarded first place for quality in life in major cities in the Mercer studies. Vienna housing policy has contributed significantly to these excellent results, as housing satisfaction and quality of life are closely linked. To understand Vienna's quite unique housing situation, you have to know its history. At the beginning of the 20th century, it was just the other way around. At the end of the Austrian monarchy and before First World War, Vienna had more than 2 million inhabitants and was bigger than it was nowadays. At that time, about 300,000 inhabitants in Vienna had no access to decent housing space. Vienna was said to be the city within Europe with the worst housing conditions. So because of this experience, the Viennese government made great efforts to improve the housing situation after World War I. The dogma was apartments are not goods, it's a right to have one. Social housing construction was funded by a tax reformation initiated by City Councillor for Finances Hugo Breitner, which put special charges on luxury goods such as champagne, entertainment, household help, or real estate. If anyone has ever heard about Hotel Sacher in Wien, they paid a lot. On the 21st of September 1923, the foundation for the first large residential construction program of the city was laid. A new municipal council decree foresaw the construction of 25,000 new apartments within 5 years and another 30,000 between 1929 and 1933. Social residential housing construction during the social democratic period known as Red Vienna, Rotes Wien, therefore was a unique thing. Until democracy broke down in 1933, more than 66,000 units were built. In 348 residential facilities and 42 settlement groups, all these elements have been said. In 1934, 1/10 of the Viennese were already living in affordable housing facilities. 1/10, which is, I guess, one of the greatest steps that could be done. Although many new approaches have been developed over the decades, the most essential principle of the First Republic's Red Vienna are still valid. In addition to the aspect of performance capacity, these include high-quality social cohesion and balanced social mix. The principle of social Vienna residential construction policy has always been to deal flexibly with the residential needs of people and construct residential buildings that are in line with the citizens' wishes. This was not only highly successful in the past, but will continue to characterize affordable housing in modern-day Vienna too. The city reacted to the growing demand for high-quality, compact and highly cost-efficient residential space, among others, with the SMART residential program and the program New Municipal Housing Construction. So in Vienna, social housing has a long and successful tradition. Dating back to 1919, Vienna has developed its model over a period of almost 100 years, interrupted only by the years of fascism and war. It's in this continuity which is unique. Today, the city of Vienna owns 220,000 municipal flats. Another 200,000 affordable flats are built by limited profit housing companies or cooperatives. These housing complexes are spread broadly across the city, ensuring a positive social mix. Social housing policies in Vienna have been shaped by the political belief that housing is a basic human right. We therefore consider it a public responsibility to provide our citizens with sufficient affordable housing. As a result, today more than 50% of all households live in subsidized housing. Vienna was one city which insisted not to privatize affordable housing. In the 1990s, when other cities were selling off their municipal housing stock, we didn't. Today, more than ever, we can see that this strategy has been successful. No other city has invested more in housing than Vienna did. In comparison with other major cities, Vienna has rather moderate rent prices. A great offer of affordable apartments is still a matter of course in Vienna. To maintain this pleasant situation, even in times when the housing market is under great pressure due to financial market and the ever-increasing population, the city administration invests about 500 million euros a year, the equivalent of about $550 million. This investment covers housing construction and restoration, as well as in the direct financial support of people with particularly low income. With this funding budget, every year around 7,000 good quality affordable apartments are built and over 5,000 apartments are refurbished. This provides the Viennese with a wide range of good quality affordable apartments. Typically, in Vienna, a person's income cannot be guessed from his or her postcode. And that's a fact. We've heard it and we're very proud about that. And if you believe on that, not even in the city center you will find social housing. Thus the city ensures the affordable housing meets high environmental standards and also offers a high standard of life. Thanks to the internationally recognized instrument of gentle urban renewal, rents can remain affordable even after extensive refurbishment. This means that those residents affected are not displaced and forced to move to other urban areas. One of the major successes of Viennese housing policy is the fact that social mixing takes place throughout the city, as well as in subsidized and municipal housing. We do not want settlements only for the poor or just for the rich. This results in high levels of social stability and strong social cohesion in Vienna. If it seems as if in Vienna is a paradise, when it comes to housing, we have to say it's not the whole truth, but anyway, we have to face similar problems like in other cities, of course. These are like increasing prices of land, the decreasing availability of sites, rising construction costs, and also global phenomena such as the financialization of housing market and short-term rental platforms. But these unpleasant developments energize us even more to continue our investments to affordable housing and to involve us furthermore in European initiatives to counteract negative effects of free market-dominated policies in urban planning and housing. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Josef Chair, and I established Wohnpartner 10 years ago and have been managing since then. Wohnpartner is the neighborhood service in the municipal housing of Vienna, or as we say in Vienna, Wiener Gemeindebau. And the second organization, beside Wiener Wohnen, which is active in the municipal housing in Vienna. Maybe you ask yourself, why two organizations and how they work together? To put it simply, if the Wiener Gemeindebau were a computer, Wiener Wohnen would be the hardware, and Wohnpartner would be the software. We strive for neighborly cooperation, participation, communication between the residents, but also with the administration in the city of Vienna. We offer community outreach work, social counseling in difficult life situations, and if the communication between the residents is not suitable, we offer professional conflict management. Before I talk about the social challenges and how we react to them, let me make a few philosophical or political comments on this topic. I think it will make it easier to understand what we do and why. My colleague, Vice Director Stangl, has already pointed out our history of the Red Vienna. I would like to stress again that this was not just a huge housing program. All areas of life were affected. Health, education, work, welfare, art and culture, leisure time, and much more. It was about the realization of a great socio-political idea of a better future after World War I. It was about the development of a new, better society. A new society based on the values of freedom, equality, justice, and solidarity. And we still feel very attached to these values in a contemporary way. Therefore, we do not see housing as a lucrative source of income. For us, housing is a human right. For this reason, the necessary social and community outreach work in the social housing estates is not subject of any economist cost benefits analysis. But the landlord, the city of Vienna, provide these resources which are necessary to ensure a good, peaceful life, regardless of income. Okay, why is housing so important for us? Because to have a good and affordable apartment in which one can live without fear of losing it again is an important basis of life for most people. Only when the basic needs of life have been met can people concentrate on other issues. Integration into society and participation in social life is unthinkable without housing. This applies in particular to people in difficult life situations. In addition, you have to be registered at the address, which is a basic prerequisite for participating in Viennese society and for exercising your civil rights. For example, for the right to vote, getting a bank account for a job, and much more. And when we speak of Wiener Gemeindebau, we speak of social housing. Thus, we have a form of housing in which the so-called middle class lives, and not only the underprivileged shortly before they become homeless. Almost a quarter of Viennese population lives in Wiener Gemeindebau. This means the people from different social strata, with different education, with or without a job, old or young, with different lifestyles, born in Austria or with an immigration background, live together. Especially for marginalized groups who need a higher degree of public support, such as people with special needs, people at risk of poverty, or others. This form of housing offers everyone the opportunity to participate in society. The conditions for access to an apartment in Wiener Gemeindebau are such that more than 75% of all Viennese people have the opportunity to rent one of the 220,000 apartments. This enables a social mix and prevents the concentration of marginalized groups. You can therefore imagine that the diversity just described presents us with great challenges. So many different peoples naturally have very different needs and also very different ideas and values. In addition, the cohesion and solidarity in society declines, as does empathy and willingness to help. These are phenomena which are evident in our society as a whole, and not only in the Wiener Gemeindebau. But it's still necessary to decide against it. As we have now heard, the city of Vienna can also fulfill its social mission through the Wiener Gemeindebau. Underprivileged and marginalized groups thus have access to affordable living space and can thus participate in social life. However, we are also aware that neighborhoods hosting these groups need support in dealing with their neighborhood's issues. That is why One Partner was established 10 years ago. Our activities are based on two pillars. On the one hand, we take many initiatives to actively promote good neighborly relations. We offer time, space, and opportunity to get to know your neighbors and to meet each other. Like Gordon W. Allport, the founder of the Context theory, we believe that contact between peoples reduces hostility, prejudice, and discrimination. This creates a social climate of acceptance. This happens, for example, through events in which we prepare meals together. We do sport together, neighbors teach their neighbors German, we sing and make music together, or we work in a community garden. The resulting relationships lead to the fact that difference of interests and conflicts do not arise, or that the residents can solve them themselves. At these events, the residents come into low threshold contact with One Partner and know that they can turn to us with confidence in the event of a problem. If conflicts nevertheless arise, our second pillar, conflict management, comes into play. Our teams consist of experts from different professions, from social worker and psychologists to career changes. We have 60 trained mediators who speak 35 different languages. They mediate in conflicts without being partial for one side and do not make any valued judgments. They mediate between the different positions and thus try to contribute a common solution. In our work, it is important to my 160 employees and to me that we are out in the field with the residents, in the community, and not sitting in a nice office and waiting for someone to come. We have 26 locations in the Wiener Gemeindebau in all city districts and can therefore be easily reached and react quickly to all situations. One Partner is a service of the city of Vienna, which is quite unique in the whole world. Some in Wiener's world. In the last 2 decades, Vienna has regularly taken top position in the international ranking of the most livable city in the world. The fact that our works contributes to maintaining and expanding this high quality of life motivates us in our daily work to give our best again and again. I'm very proud to be able to share our experience here today with you, and it shows that we are maybe on the right track. All the best for the future, and thank you for your attention.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the organizers to bring together this really interesting symposium. I knew almost nothing about Vienna housing for this, and so I'm really excited to learn from the delegation who's here today. So my job today, I believe, is to give you a little bit of context for thinking about housing policy in what we call the DMV, the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia area, so we can have a larger and more robust conversation about housing policy moving forward in our region, and I think things that we can learn from the Vienna example. So I'm going to be telling you a little bit about what that context looks like and looking at some of the strengths, challenges, and opportunities that I see in our region for moving a more inclusive, affordable housing policy forward. So first, you may not know a lot about our region, but we are a very diverse region of about 5.5 million people. Unlike Vienna, we are not one municipality. We are 3 different states plus the District of Columbia, which is a federal territory. We have 23 counties and about 90 different municipalities. But we are a wealthy region and a highly educated region. We are heavily dependent on federal public sector employment, being the federal government and contractors to the federal government. But it also means that we attract a lot of well-paid and well-educated workforce to our region. So we have a high median income, a high degree of those with a bachelor's rate, but we're also a very diverse region. We have a high foreign-born population of about 23%, and we have a biracial diversity, a good mix of white, African-American, Hispanic, and Asian populations in our region, much more so than many regions around the United States. But we also have deep poverty in our region, and poverty rates that are less than the area median, but if we think about a region that is so wealthy as the DC area, I think those national poverty rates mask a lot of deep poverty that exists in our region. We are also a very segregated region, and we have, while we have grown in some ways less segregated in terms of concentrated poverty over the years, we've still maintained deep pockets of poverty, and these are also racialized pockets of poverty. So the maps that you see here are showing you how poverty by race has changed within the DC area over the last 30 years. So in 1980, the map on the left, what it shows you is that poverty was almost exclusively contained within the borders of the District of Columbia, which is that diamond-shaped figure there. And it was almost exclusively African American. And over the last 30 years, we've seen a shift not only in where poverty is located, but also who constitutes the poor in our region. So the green dots on the map are Hispanic, the red dots on the map are Asian American, the blue dots on the map are white, and the yellow dots are African American. And what you'll see is that we have seen a deconcentration of poverty outside of the center city, growing poverty in our suburbs, and a more diverse population of who is poor. And of course, this has implications for affordable housing policies and where we locate and how we deal with affordable housing policies across the region. And we are currently in an affordable housing crisis. We are not only in an affordable housing crisis in the nation, but we have an acute affordable housing crisis here in the DC area. The map on the left shows you that in the last 10 years or so, we have seen a dramatic decrease in the housing that is affordable at different levels. These are rent data. But what it doesn't show you is the cost burden for those families at different income levels, and that has also been rising dramatically over that same period of time. And it has been most acute, not surprisingly, for those who make the lowest income levels in our region. Just recently, the national somebody came out with a study of the DC region that showed that our region, out of all the metropolitan areas across the United States in the last 4 years, has seen the most intense gentrification of any metropolitan region across the United States. So displacement has been on the rise, and especially displacement in that traditional dividing line in our region between East and West, which you can see kind of noted by that pink line of displacement, which represents African American displacement from some of the core areas that are now rapidly gentrifying our region. So what do we have in the region in terms of affordable housing policies? Well, I would argue that the DC region has some of the most progressive policies and tenant protections in the nation. We lead in affordable housing policies in some of the municipalities, most notably the District of Columbia and Montgomery County. In the District of Columbia, you have rent control. You have strong tenant protections against evictions. You have the tenant opportunity to purchase law, which is a law that allows tenants whose buildings are being sold the opportunity to have the first right to actually purchase that building. And there are housing opportunity funds as well as the funding of organizers that help tenants to enact that right. There's accessory dwelling unit provisions in many of our municipalities. And we have one of the longest standing inclusionary zoning policies in Montgomery County. We also have an inclusionary zoning policy in many of the other municipalities, including DC. And many policies that allow for density bonuses for those developers that are building more affordable housing policies. So we have a lot to work with in our region. We also have an abundance, because we have such a wealthy region, we have an abundance of housing trust funds that are going into helping to produce affordable housing. In the District of Columbia right now, you have about $100 million housing trust fund. In Montgomery County, I think it's about $28 million. And we have rich resources in many of our municipalities. We also have a lot of protections for established homeowners and elderlies that have been in place in their properties for a long time to help prevent from displacement. We also have a lot of tools and data about affordable housing. There are maps like you see here on the right, which is the at-risk subsidized units of affordable housing in the district, that are mapped in many different municipalities throughout our region that help us identify units of affordable housing that are at risk of expiring or losing their subsidy. And the DC area also, or DC in particular, also has an affordable housing policy where affordable housing portal where many of the policies are kept. The picture on the right just shows you one of the many success stories of tenants that have successfully used the tenant's opportunity to purchase law to purchase their building in Columbia Heights, which is one of the most rapidly gentrifying areas of our city. But we have a lot of challenges in terms of affordable housing as well. We live in a very diverse and expansive region, but we don't have a strong regional government system that allows us to create affordable housing policies at the regional level. What we have is a Metropolitan Council of Government that acts as a convening body, a data portal, an educational body, but is not able to enact policy for our region. So in order to enact a policy around affordable housing, we have to get a bunch of different municipalities and states on board, and we haven't been able to successfully do that. While I also tout and say that we have some of the most progressive affordable housing policies in the nation, those affordable housing policies exist only in a few of our municipalities. But we have areas like Loudoun and Manassas County and parts of Virginia that have none of these tools at all, right? And we work as a metropolitan area because people live and work throughout the region. So it's been difficult to get some municipalities that have lower resources, that have a different politics to enact some of these same policies in our area, and particularly to break through that east-west divide that I showed you in the maps earlier, right? So most of our affordable housing has typically been contained within the District of Columbia, as has most of the poverty. And now, as we see the urbanization of poverty moving, we see it growing east, and we see most of the pressures for affordable housing growing in that area. We don't see a lot of policies nor affordable housing being built in the west side of our region. We have a lot of protections in place for what we consider affordable housing, but if you really think about those who most are in need of affordable housing, Dr. Dawkins talked earlier about the decline of public housing for those most in need. We do not have a lot of public housing left in our region. Those that we do have is in really, really poor condition. And the voucher system that we have has a lot of barriers in terms of portability, moving from municipality to municipality, as well as discrimination in the system. And so there are some areas of our region that have source of income discrimination laws in place, but we see over and over again people being denied housing. and especially in a Trump administration where we've seen a lot of aggressive policies coming from the federal government on immigration, as well as those formerly incarcerated. We see that moving down to the local level, and we have a lot of problems in both public and in private housing with discrimination in housing. And in tackling new frontiers in housing. As that poverty has shifted from the inner core of Washington, D.C. and out into the suburbs, we now have a lot of challenges of providing for affordable housing in those areas. I work a lot in the community of Langley Park, which is shown here on the right, and that's a community that's a predominantly Latino immigrant community, is along the Purple Line, this new light rail line that is helping to increase the cost of living there, but we have a housing stock that has not been invested in a long time. This is typical of the inner ring suburbs of our nation's metropolitan areas, and we don't have a lot of protections and a lot of policies that would help to improve housing in that community and many like it. So what are our areas of opportunity in this region? I think we need to leverage some of the national trends. I think our region has the opportunity to fall behind as a leader. We see states like Oregon and California now leading in the affordable housing trends by eliminating single-family zoning. This is a trend that we've seen in many states now and regions. We see statewide rent control that Dr. Dawkins mentioned recently passed in California. And we have areas for collaboration that we're not currently taking advantage of in the ways that we should. We have foundations and new business organizations that are coming up with new trust funds. Amazon just put in a lot of money into affordable housing in Virginia in a state that only has a $9.5 million affordable housing trust fund. The private companies are doing more than the government. We mentioned equitable TOD planning that is happening at MCOG, our regional planning organization. And we are seeing collaboration around things like homelessness that's happening from Prince George's and Montgomery and the district. But we need to take advantage of the data that's coming out, more timely data on rents, for instance, that have not been well collected. The National Center for Smart Growth is helping Montgomery County to map some of their rent data. We have new data on evictions, code violation data that is more timely and is needed to be collected more often. And we have new platforms that are out there to help us think about crowdsourcing data and adding stories to affordable housing that are so important for making the case. And finally, and in conclusion, we need to do more to enforce and improve the existing policies that we have. Many of the existing policies that we have, ADU policies, inclusionary zoning, rent control, and code enforcement, have a lot of loopholes that are allowing people to get through the system and not allowing these policies to work. So there's some low-hanging fruits in our region to make this area more affordable. It's to start with our existing policies and to make them more robust. So thank you.
Hi. Hello. Hello. My name is Casey Anderson. I'm the chair of the Montgomery Planning Board. I want to start by talking about some of the many things I don't know anything about. I don't know what it costs to build housing in Vienna. I don't really know what the structure of the financing and development of affordable housing is in Vienna. I know enough about what it costs to build public infrastructure, like transit projects, for example, in the United States as opposed to in Europe, to know that there's some very significant differences in cost of building stuff. So the Purple Line, for example, or heavy rail, in the United States costs an order of magnitude sometimes more than it costs to build in Europe. So those are topics about which I know nothing and have no opinion. However, I do know a little bit, although I'm not a real estate finance person, not particularly quantitative. I do know a little bit about what it costs to build things in this region. And the reason I want to talk about that is because when I get into conversations with people about social housing and ask, well, what do you think about social housing? Would that be a solution to some of our affordable housing problems? I said, I really have no idea. And the reason I have no idea is because I don't know what's being proposed as far as how it's going to be constructed or acquired. And I don't know on what land it will be located. I think it's safe to say that one of the unstated premises of a lot of people who have proposals about affordable housing generally, not just social housing, but things like rent control or various subsidy programs or ratcheting up the requirements for our moderately priced dwelling unit program, is that if only we could remove the profit motive, that is to say, if only developers weren't insistent on just making so much money, that this would be easy, or at least substantially cheaper than it is now, that we could deliver a lot of housing at a relatively affordable price if we could try to have the government directly enter the housing market in a more expansive way than it currently does. And the second unstated premise is often, well, I understand that it costs a lot to build things. If we had no land cost because we built on public land, that would reduce the cost of building housing. So I just wanted to lay out some numbers for you to really try to ground this discussion in an understanding of what it costs to build things around here, even if you back out the profit to developers of land and you assume that we have land available. Sorry about that. How's that? Okay, Montgomery County has a very low residential vacancy rate for multifamily, about 5% you see over there on the far right, so that's pretty close to, frictional level of vacancy. You have some turnover inevitably, but almost all of our multifamily properties are what you consider close to fully leased. We have strong rent growth over time. I think the projections for the next year about 5%, which is from a real estate investor's point of view very healthy. From the point of view of somebody who's trying to rent an apartment, it's maybe not as good news. But the picture here is we have mostly leased up apartment buildings that are commanding higher and higher rent. So you would expect that if you didn't know anything else, that in a market economy, there would be plenty of reasons to build more units, if it in fact were profitable to build more units. This chart shows the number of residential building permits that have been issued since the late 90s. And so I won't read all these numbers. What you see is that right about around 2009 was the trough, right when the economy just melted down, and there were about under 1,000 building permits issued that year. That was the low point. And that was after a period of many years where we were routinely producing over 4,000, maybe 5,000 units a year. Since the economy started to recover in 2012, 13, 14, we got back up into that range of about 3,500 units a year, which is about the 20-year average. So we got back to about what you might consider a relatively normal rate of housing production. But then you see those bars drop down again in 2015, 16, 17, 18, to the point where now under 2,000 units a year. So that would suggest that if the apartments are full and there's pretty healthy rent growth, it must be pretty difficult to build things. Otherwise you would see more production. So I talked to some people who are in the real estate business because, as I say, I'm not a real estate finance person, and asked for some illustrative or relatively generic data on what they thought the costs of building various types of housing are in Montgomery County. Some typical cases that could be considered relatively typical. So what you see here is on the left, we'll start with land costs. On the left, which is the sort of suburban, exurban parts of the county, out in the middle of nowhere, basically, not in the rural area, but the parts of the county that are relatively remote from the District of Columbia and transit and urban centers, you have about $40,000 a unit land cost. In the mid-county, which is sort of suburban but more intensively developed and somewhat closer in, about $35,000 a unit. And near the metro stations, places like Silver Spring, Wheaton, or Bethesda, they're just sort of averaging that out, about $60,000 a unit. Now that assumes, in the up-county, surface parking, low-rise construction. In the mid-county, that's more like, mid-rise, Texas donut type of idea. And in the metro areas, that's high-rise concrete and steel construction. So you're, even with the larger number of units per acre in the metro station areas, you're still looking at much higher land costs per unit, even though that's spread over a larger number of units. So if you add construction costs, meaning what it costs to buy materials, pay skilled labor, hire your contractors, build the parking, that's what it looks like. About $187,000 a unit in the up county, about $219,000 in the mid county, and in the urban areas that are transit accessible at $283,000 a unit. If you add the final layer, which is all of the fees, exactions, I guess what you call regulatory costs, you get a number more like $245,000 a unit in the up county, $277,000 in the mid county, and $328,000 a unit in the metro, the TOD type of areas. So depending on which area we're talking about, building multifamily housing, before anybody who's developing the property is going to make any profit, you're talking about $245,000, $328,000 per unit. And of that, land and construction costs are somewhere from about 75 to 85% of the cost of every unit, which brings us to the question of land. And I don't want to go into this in great detail, but I just observed that the county about a decade ago adopted a master plan for the area of the Shade Grove Metro, which is just off of I-270, end of the red line on the west side of the county. That plan called for development of mostly townhouses with some multifamily to try to take advantage of that metro station instead of try to transform it, instead of being like an auto collector where people would sort of park and ride, to create a community around the metro station. But to do that, they had to relocate a bunch of county facilities, maintenance yards, things like that, that had sort of almost like light industrial type public uses that had been located there previously. And one of the most pressing problems was to find a place to park all the school buses, because the school bus maintenance depot was there. It's 10 years later. We have 324,000 acres of land in Montgomery County. And for 10 years, we tried to find a place to park. How many school buses is it on? A few hundred. A couple hundred school buses. We can't seem to get it together to find a place to put 200 school buses in more. So when people talk about social housing, they say, well, this could be great, and we could do this so much less expensively if we just sort of take the profit motive out of it, with the government being directly involved in the market. The first question is, how are you going to pay for that? And the second question is, where are you going to put it? And it seems in the abstract like that would be a straightforward proposition. The government owns a lot of land. But in practice, you find that almost every bare piece of dirt, and there are not that many bare pieces of dirt really that have no improved, they're not totally unimproved. But if you find a parcel of land in Montgomery County, it has significant legal, economic, environmental, political constraints to using it to build more housing. So Construction costs, still going up about 3-4% a year. We've raised our transportation impact tax and school impact taxes. That's another, economic public finance imperative that's also got obviously a big political dimension. I don't mean to say all this to be a downer. I really am just trying to give you some baseline for understanding like what you're dealing with in these kind of conversations. I actually don't think that it's unrealistic or impractical to have the government take a much more ambitious, expansive role in directly providing housing. But I think that any thinking about how to do that is going to start with the economics that are underlying any kind of new construction. Or you could buy existing housing and try to preserve it and turn it into housing that's going to remain accessible from an economic point of view to people at relatively lower incomes. So what is the market doing with these type of buildings? A Class B apartment building built in 1966 sold a couple months ago for $186,000 a unit in the Glenmont area, not right next to the metro, but in the general vicinity. Class A apartment building in 2016, built in 2016, sold in 2017 for $397,000 a unit in downtown Bethesda. So it matters a lot where you're talking about. I do think there's obviously an opportunity, at $186,000 a unit, but those units are not located right next to the places where everybody wants to be. And they want to be there for good reasons. They're near jobs, they're near transit, they're near a lot of amenities. That's not to say you wouldn't want to acquire some of these lower, less expensive buildings, but I think you got to ask yourself exactly what do you mean when you say we're going to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing and we're going to make it available to a broader category of people across a wider range of incomes. That's a lot to bite off. And I think we could bite it off, but we would have to really think about how exactly we're going to pay for that and where we're going to put it. So that's my 2 cents on the economics of this study.
Hello? Yeah, we're running a little bit behind, but I think we can maybe take a question or two, if we can find the best question in the audience. You get the...
Your whole presentation led up to the obvious question, which is how does this compare with the costs in Vienna? Nobody has addressed that. I don't see anybody particularly on the agenda to address that. But I hope that the city council member from Vienna, being the finance minister, will address that. So it isn't a question so much as it's a hope.
Anyone want to take that on? The cost comparison in Vienna, typical unit.
Can you say the question louder, Casey?
Yeah, so what would be the typical cost of a unit in Vienna? We've heard a lot about the building costs in Montgomery County.
Where does the money come from?
Yeah, and where does the money come from? What are the costs and where does the money come from?
Okay, sit down. Okay. So I just can give you some similar numbers maybe. I'm not quite sure what a unit means exactly in case of size or what it is. But
One flat.
well, I understand one flat, but it could be between something like 40 square meters to 150. I don't know. It could be a big difference. But I understood that some criteria would be the cost of land. We calculate in Austria that a flat shouldn't cost more than something like 2,000, 2,200 euros per square meter. Otherwise, it wouldn't be financiable on our market. I think it's you can add something like 10% to have it in dollars. Is that a comparison you can use?
And multiply by 10 to get some certain meters per square feet.
I would say one sentence to this. It's not easy to compare the two systems because we in Vienna, usually we have the land, yes, it's our property. And you have the problem to buy this land, yes, and so you can compare these different systems, yes. We have very good circumstances. We made these circumstances in the last 100 years, yes, and so it's not easy for other countries who don't have this land to make the same. You would say the same?
Of course, that's one of the main problems. Of course, you will need to find a way to get the land for a price you can afford. So that's the point. So somehow, probably find a way to make the land less an economic good that can be traded and the profits can be made with it. I know that's a bit difficult to understand, or you have to use new space that is free. But of course, it's an infrastructure problem.
Hi, my name is Contessa Bourbon. I'm a journalist from London Times and other papers. I'd like to ask the panelists, how can private sector and non-government organizations partner with the government to help in providing affordable and social housing? What programs they can cooperate or collaborate?
To whom is that question going? Who are you asking, me? Yeah. Okay. I'm not quite sure if I have the right answer for you because our system works really quite different. We have organizations that are non-profit organizations that provide the units in a widespread. So I'm not quite sure if this is the kind of private you mean. How to make a private organization not taking the profit, I don't know.
So I'll just say from the DMV region area, we do have a lot of nonprofit housing developers at work in our area. But part of the challenge of nonprofit housing developers is having some funding coming in from public sources. So Montgomery Housing Partnership, for instance, and Montgomery County works a lot with the county and gets a lot of county funding in order to do their work. But Prince George's County, which does not have currently a robust housing trust fund, has few nonprofit housing developers working there because they typically haven't had as strong affordable housing policies. So the presence of nonprofit housing developers and the availability of public funding and affordable housing policy go hand in hand.
Yeah, I would. There are federal tax programs that help to make affordable housing construction and preservation economically viable. A lot of the nonprofit developers you're talking about will use those tax credits together with the funding the local government makes available. But one of the things that I've observed is that some of the nonprofits that specialize in acquiring and preserving existing housing struggle to find projects where it really makes sense to acquire and rehabilitate the property. If they can find it at a price that makes sense and can be accommodated with the resources they have available, and I'm not talking about people who have 2 nickels for every, I mean, there's sophisticated, people who have a deep understanding of how to put together these deals. They are telling us that often the condition of the units is such that they just need to redevelop the whole property. It doesn't really make sense to, try to maintain it and continue leasing. So even if you could acquire the property at a relatively low price with the help of some of these tax programs, then the question becomes, is that even viable or desirable? Does it meet a minimum standard that you would expect for quality that you'd want to encourage people to pursue that as a way to provide more housing?
Let's take one more.
Some of the text seems to indicate that what Vienna has done is removed the profit motive from housing. And does the government continue to retain ownership in order to accomplish that? And if so, how did you get the cooperation of the residents to accept that?
Thank you. To take away the profit is the one thing. I think that has happened in the past, in another time where things could also be done in a different way. In the time between First and Second World War, when the program was started, and something like 66,000 units were built, the situation was, of course, a different one because land was not the biggest problem in that system. They could use the land that was there and built with public money a lot of units. The difference to now is you can just get the part of the profit out of the system if it's less interesting for private persons just to try to get margins from it. You can say the land has to be kept in price. One method in Vienna was that 2/3 of all land that is dedicated for living will be in the future social living. So that means that also the land has lost its value. Thank you. I think this is one of the possibilities. The other thing is that a wide group of residents in Vienna can address that. More than 75%, you said before, are able to address a social apartment and can get that. So that means that our social apartments that of course have a big market share at the moment have a big influence on the market price. Even the private apartments can be so expensive because they have to be in competition with the public ones. And I think this is one of the main reasons why the system works. It's still influence on the market because of a big amount of apartments, and of course the chance for nearly everybody to get it. If you would say these apartments are just for the poor, you would stop that effect, of course.
Thank you to our panelists. We had a great discussion and we hope to continue that. I don't want to move too quickly into the next session, so I want to call it a day. We'll move on to finance and how do you do this.
we're going to go ahead and start the next session, so please don't head out. Okay, let me turn it over to our good colleague, Dr. Garrett Knapp.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay. Here we go. Dr. Knapp.
Thank you so much. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Garrett Knapp. I direct the Smart Growth Center here at the University of Maryland in the School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. Certainly pleased to be here. I want to thank the organizers, Renewal and Hans in particular, for their efforts in this thing. The Smart Growth Center, under the capable leadership of Willow and Casey, have done a lot of work in housing in recent years. We work closely with Montgomery County on several housing projects. We look forward to starting some new ones. We worked on Prince George's County housing study. We have a new study that we're about to begin with the Department of Housing and Community Development at the state level. And as was mentioned earlier, we are the administrative home of the Purple Line Corridor Coalition, and we will soon be releasing a housing plan for the entire corridor. So, good to be here. Pleased to work with our colleagues around the state, and certainly in Prince George's and Montgomery County. One of the great things, I think probably the best thing about my job is that I get to work very closely with the local government officials, state government officials, so we are not ivory tower folks doing research, but we are deeply engaged in some of the policy discussions at the state, county, and local level. I want to welcome our friends from Vienna. Terrific to see you here. It's not only one of the most livable places in the world, but one of the most beautiful places in the world, cities. If you ever need some help with your research in Vienna, we're happy to come over and take a look and work with you. So just very quickly, how many of you live in a house, in an apartment, or a mobile home, or something like that? Okay, good, most of you. How many of you still live in the basement of your parents' house? One guy here, okay. How many of you pay rents or mortgages more than you would really like to? You really don't live in your parents' basement. That's awesome. Oops. How many of you live in a housing unit of some type that you think is not at all subsidized in any way? Some of you think so. How many of you deduct your mortgage, have ever deducted your mortgage interest from your federal income taxes? Okay. But my point is that we subsidize housing and support housing in the United States in many, many ways. Many of the policies are outlined by my colleagues at the state and county and local level, and by Dr. Langemann as well. But we do subsidize housing in a very big way through the mortgage interest deduction. So it's not that the government isn't involved in housing markets in the United States, but in fact very deeply so, and it just isn't of the same form that we are learning about in Vienna. So I want to move on to our panelists. Fortunately, this session is about financing, policy, planning, lessons from Vienna. We are going to answer all the questions that Casey Anderson was wondering about and didn't have the answers to when he started. So we're now going to be answering Casey's questions. And I'm going to go very briefly. The bios are in your handout, but we'll go one at a time. So we've already heard from Kurt Sturzenbecker from the city of Vienna. He is a Vienna County Council member, chairman of the Committee on Finance, Economy, and Digitalization and International Affairs. Seems to know a lot about everything. Please.
Once again, you can hear me, yes. Perhaps some words to the last discussion. We have different systems, yes, in Europe and in Vienna especially, or perhaps in the United States. We have, for us, housing, social housing is not a question of profit. Yes, we don't want to have profit there. The idea of the municipal apartments, Gemeindebauten, was the municipality buys apartments, social houses, and then gets the rents from this, but the rents are only as high that we can refurbish the houses. Yes, we don't want to have a profit from this. Yes, it's against our opinion. Yes, and the land usually is our land. Because of that, it wasn't very. It was cheaper than in other countries. Yes, and that is the first idea. The second idea is the subsidized houses. There are companies, but the majority of them are non-profit companies, and they buy these dwellings, they buy the houses, and they get from us perhaps a third of the building costs, and sometimes the ground, and then for that they have some regulations. Yeah? The rents are can be very high. They have to be perhaps 8 or 7.5. What? 7.5, yes. And other, I will say this in my speech, but that's the second idea with the subsidized apartments, yes. But it's natural that usual private profit organization don't want to make this, yes, but it's possible. They have the possibilities to buy, to build houses for richer persons where they have profit, yes, but 2/3 of our new dwellings are social housing dwellings, yes, and 1/3 is private for the others, yes. And so perhaps you can understand our systems. This to the last discussion, but now I want once again say that we strongly believe that, and that's the difference, the public services, including housing, cannot be left to the private market alone. Yes, we made this experience of some people in Germany, in other countries in the last decades, and we saw that everywhere where only the market is the player, the rents are very, very high. And we saw that there where we have a mixed system, yes, like in Vienna, the rents are not so high, much better for the people. And so we solved our conclusions. This funding through tax, and yes, I will say that we strongly believe that public services cannot be the private market alone, I said. Yes, that's why all in Vienna spends around $550 million on housing costs per year. This funding through taxation creates a reliable basis for the planning of a complex housing program. And the funding of social housing construction in Austria is tied to a fixed portion of income tax, yes, housing promotion contribution. The quota is regulated by the federal law and amounts to 0.5% of the gross pay, so the income of employees and employer. So that means every employee and every employer pays 0.5 of his income in this fund, and because of that, we have then in Vienna 550 million to subsidize the social housing. Yes, and the people accept this very, very enthusiastically, not so, but they accept it. And why? Why accept this? Yes, because we have delegations from Germany and from Sweden, and so why do the people accept this system? Yes, and we say because they have the benefits of it, and if they have it not personally, they have it for their children. Yes, if the children of the this is very good for the middle class people. For the first, it's good if we have not very much poor people, and the poor people, I said, in Vienna are not very, very poor, but the system works so well because the middle class see that system for the middle class too, and perhaps for the, not only for the middle class, for the higher middle class too. Yes, and so they see we pay 0.5 of our income, but then we have dwellings, social house dwellings for our children. They come and they get dwellings which are not only affordable, they have also, I will then say, architectonic benefits and so on. This is what I wanted to say the first. In 2019, the financial benefits paid by the city of Vienna to projects amount were $403 million. In 2018, housing promotions subsidies were granted by the provincial government of Vienna for approximately 6,000 dwellings. Yes, these expenditures are regulated in law. It's a Wohnbauförderungsgesetz, and which does not only promote the construction of new housing, but also ensures the preservation of existing buildings through renovation. Yes, so we have new houses, but we have also the renovation, also for private apartments. Yes, that's what I want to say. The private apartments, they have also the benefits of these systems, and thus the buildings can be brought up to the latest technical standards and adapted to the current needs of residents. Besides the funding for construction and renovation, benefits are also dispersed to individuals who are unable to afford even subsidized rents. In 2019, an amount of approximately $200 million is earmarked for this benefit category. So we have some people who can't afford even the subsidized rents, and so they get money that they can afford it. Yes, this is 110 million. And all people have the benefit of this because we have a social mixed systems, we have no-go areas, and if you have more people who have an apartment and who are poor, you have less criminality. Yes, and everybody has the benefit of this. And now it's a little bit complicated, the next what I want to say. This is the developers' competitions. This is for the subsidized the dwellings, what we are building in Vienna, and they are built more or less, the majority of them, by non-profit organizations, and the construction of new subsidized housing is regulated by strict economic, ecological, architecture criteria, and must be socially sustainable. Developers' competitions are an important tool in the development of new subsidized residential buildings. They are organized by the Wohnfonds, it's an organization of the city of Vienna, and they are acquiring and providing land. That's very important. And in the field of project development and quality assurance in subsidized housing construction in the Austrian capital. So the Wohnfonds provides the land. And so for housing construction projects with a volume of at least 500 subsidized dwellings, developers' competitions are mandatory. Smaller projects are evaluated by the Land Advisory Board, which is also a part of Wohnfonds Wien. Yes, that's very interesting that this developers' competition takes place, and then one is the winner of this. He has 4 important criteria: economy, social sustainability, architecture, and ecology. These are all the same important, yes, and this developer who comes and has the best projects is the winner. Yes, it's very easy. And project teams composed of project developers, architects, open space planners, and other experts devise precisely calculated implementation concepts for developers' competitions, and an interdisciplinary jury then evaluates the entries and selects the best, highest quality projects. The winning team then purchases the land and at fixed prices. This is the system what works. It is the task of the jury to identify balanced entries that ensure quality in 4 areas, as I said, these 4 areas. And these conditions, the competitions, create an innovative supply of housing units that reflect the needs of the population and are very affordable while safeguarding the efficient use of housing promotion funds. It should be emphasized that the winning projects must be implemented as submitted. Both non or limited profit or commercial developers may participate in the competitions. The winning team then purchased the construction site at a fixed price, the housing promotion dispersed up to 35% of the total construction cost, and enables the team to implement the victorious project. In return, the developers guarantee certain planning qualities, fixed construction costs, and stable rent levels. Yes. Yes, not too long. Yeah, I would say what is very, very important of the West. Yeah. But the money is the key issue in building affordable housing, we have already said. Important also in Vienna is also the tenancy law, the Mietrechtsgesetz. That means that a tenant has a very strong law. Yes, in many countries a tenant hasn't any law. Yes, in Austria a tenant has a strong law, and the tenant in social housing has almost the same rights like a operator in other countries. Yes, this is very important, and so in our country in Vienna, the social housing and the tenants have a very strong position. Yes, what would I say if I have to finish my speech in the next time? Because the lady said this, I would have many to say to you. But I would say recent years have seen land and real estate prices in many European cities spiraling out of control, and to counteract this development, the city of Vienna amended its building code in November 2018 by introducing subsidized housing zoning category. This is very important. I think my colleague Steiner already mentioned it. You mentioned it? No? That means if a plot of thus classified belonging to the subsidized housing category, 2/3 of the usable floor space created for housing purposes must, as a rule, be taken up by subsidized dwelling. This caps rents and safeguards that affordable homes will continue to be constructed. Yes, and only 1/3 is for the private. Yes, this is very important, and so I would say that all these measures together provide for an adequate supply and of good housing in Vienna as well as in the rest of Austria, and so ensuring a high quality of affordable housing can only be done with constant and consistent commitment and a wealth of action. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. Thank you once more. Thank you. Thank you. As the only card-carrying economist in the School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation, let me second the notion that it's all about the money. It's all about the money. So, our second speaker, Matt Heckles. He's the Assistant Secretary of State, Assistant Secretary in the State of Maryland, Department of Housing and Community Development. We're having some extensive conversation with Matt and his colleagues about a state housing assessment. He's got a long history in housing finance, both in the single-family and multifamily market. Please take it away, Matt.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to be here today. This has been really amazing. So these are my notes because everything has changed since I got here a couple hours ago. So first, thank you again for inviting me to our hosts at the University of Maryland, to the folks from Vienna. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us. I was going to try to do my talk in German, but nobody wants that. I'm impressed with how you can do this in English. And also I just wanted to extend a welcome, I guess, as the state representative here from the governor, Governor Hogan, and the secretary of our department, Secretary Ken Holt, who is the secretary of the Department of Housing and Community Development. So thank you for being here and welcome on their behalf. You know, one of the things that I'm struck by, I think, as I've listened to a lot of these conversations today, is expectations. You know, I think if I asked the folks in the room, you know, what is the American dream? Just raise a hand if you know what the American dream is. When people say the American dream, when it comes to housing, right? Home ownership. We talk about owning homes. Even from the very beginning, you know, in our history, we talk about home ownership, we talk about land and ownership of land. So that's a very important concept in America. And I think that may be one of the biggest things, one of the biggest differences that we're experiencing here that I'm realizing. You know, when you have home ownership, and if that is in fact the American dream, to have a home with a little fence around it and 2 kids and a dog running around, and that is what people think of when they think of the American dream in home ownership. And that means that apartments, that these apartments that we talk about, whether they're market rate or affordable, are already a second class. It's already less desirable in America. It doesn't sound like that's true in Austria. That perhaps there is more desire to live in a communal space, in a space where there are multi-units, multi-family, as we call it. So, you know, I think that for me, when we talk about homeownership, this is something that we've worked on a lot at the Department of Housing. We subsidize the access to homeownership for first-time home buyers. There are many barriers to homeownership. We talk about credit score, we talk about down payment, availability to put a down payment and to close. The closing costs of buying a home are very high. So that's one of the things that we do at the department, is that we help subsidize the acquisition of homes for first-time home buyers. And since we have a number of students in the room, you're going to want to pay attention to the third bullet. We have a new program that is helping people with student debt. Student debt, I think in the United States we have about $1.8 trillion of outstanding student debt. It is the 3rd largest asset held by the federal government. But student debt, when you look at the debt-to-income ratio for someone to buy a house, is a barrier. And so with our Smart Buy program, we've creatively gotten to a place where we can help pay off student debt at the same time as you are buying a house. And so it's a very unique program. I think it's a couple of states have tried to tackle the student debt problem for homeownership. I think we've got the best model in the state. And Governor Hogan has invested, this is the 2nd year of the program, it's up to $6 million in this year's budget, and it is a great reason to not move to Virginia. So, let me talk a little bit about rental, because I think I started off thinking that we had some real strong differences in the way that we provide social housing. I'm not sure that the differences are as great maybe as when I was first starting to hear what you guys do in Vienna. In the United States, we do very much the same thing. We have access, we through our department provide access to tax credits and to other forms of subsidy that bring down the cost, that subsidize the cost to build housing. Developers, whether nonprofit or for-profit, come to us, they compete for those assets, for the tax credits. And really the tax credits, you know, it's about money. That becomes money, right? So we allocate credits to a developer who goes and exchanges those credits on a market for cash. That cash writes down the cost of construction. So when you think about keeping rents affordable in these tax credit projects that we will develop or that we will finance, the agreement is that the developer keeps the rents low. So that limits the amount of cash that comes back into the project to pay for debt service, operations, maintenance, and so on. So you have a limited amount of income coming into the project, so you have to bring down the cost. And the way that we do that is through these tax credits. We give them tax credits, they go into the market, they exchange it for dollars that come back in. Now, instead of having a project that has $20 million in debt for $20 million of construction costs, maybe you have a project with $10 million in debt and $10 million in tax credit equity and other subsidies from other sources. So you only have to pay off your mortgage of $10 million if you're that developer. You can keep your rents low and keep these units affordable. Now this is a relatively new project or new program at the federal level. For the most part, the tax credit program has been around for the past, well, I guess it's getting to 30 or 40 years or so. Before that, public housing is how we provided affordable housing in the country. As you heard before, 1% of our housing stock is public housing. Over the last 20 years, the amount of federal dollars going into the public housing program, especially the capital side, the money that public housing authorities use to keep those public or social housing projects up to a certain amount of livability, has decreased by 53%. It's gone from about $4 billion a year to about $1.5 billion per year. And that has caused about a $26 billion backlog in maintenance at public housing. And so the federal government has basically said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not even going to, in a way, we're not even going to bother. So we are privatizing, something that you said that you resisted in Vienna over the years. So this tax credit model is a way for the federal government to stop building social housing in the way that I think we're used to with the public housing model, and moving it to in the tax credit model, it does have private ownership. It is a private developer, for-profit or non-profit, but still a private owner that has responsibility at the end of the day for all of the goings-on at that project. So they manage it, and they pay the debt service, and they collect rents, they do all of that. Once we finance, we really only make sure that they continue with the terms of that financing, and we have 40-year affordability terms linked to the tax credit program. So our annual qualified allocation plan is the annual process by which we select developers and select projects. We do look at many of the same things that you mentioned. You know, how much affordability the developer is proposing. There are ranges across within projects and between projects about how affordable that rent is. We look at the design. We look at energy efficiency. We look at context, community context. We're very concerned. I think in the past we've been very happy that if we provided affordable housing, we basically said, check, we've done it. But now we're much more concerned about how that affordable housing is going to impact the community within which it is located. So we're looking also for more opportunities for our residents, for the residents of that housing over the long term. So we're looking to site these affordable housing projects in communities of opportunity where there are good schools and access to jobs and transportation, and trying to deconcentrate poverty. So that's slide 2. I only have 4. Okay. So one other piece that a big piece of what the department does is invest in neighborhood revitalization. And so especially in the city of Baltimore, I think the numbers are that, I forget the year, sometime in the last several decades, the city of Baltimore was at about 1 million people population, and it has dropped significantly. I think it's by 40% or so. It's about a 700,000 inhabitant city at this point. So there's a lot of vacant property. We actually, in the city of Baltimore, perhaps have the opportunity to implement a Vienna model, because there is a lot of property that is vacant and abandoned in the city of Baltimore. Now, we are using Project Core to demolish. There are about 16,000 vacant row homes. A lot of row homes that were built in the 1920s, maybe 1930s. Brick construction, single family, townhomes, all connected, sometimes for a block at a time. Sometimes right now that entire block is vacant. And so what we're able to do in partnership with the City of Baltimore is acquire the title and deed for those properties and then pay for the demolition. And in a way, what we're trying to do there is prepare that land for redevelopment. It is even more difficult to provide affordable housing if you add to the cost of the land the cost of clearing a vacant building out of there. And so by clearing out the buildings, we are hopefully making that land more available for investment. I'm gonna skip that. I think that's about all I would like to talk about. Otherwise, it's gonna
Terrific. So, closing up, we have the new Director of Montgomery County Department of Health and Community Affairs. Pleased to welcome to the state of Maryland, I see you.
Thank you very much. I know that you all are waiting for that coffee break for a long time, so I'm going to be brief. I'm going to summarize my slides. You can go to slide number 3 and then I'll start talking. So I was patiently listening to all of the comments and I was doing some back of the envelope calculation. And I'm sure we have developers and students in the room probably don't figure it out that housing in the city of Vienna is pretty darn expensive. The only thing is that they have social housing model which is totally different from how we do business in the United States. Now, that being said, our friends with the city of Vienna have figured out certain things and they figured out those things long time ago, which we are trying to figure out in this region now. If you are a developer and you do number crunching, what is the one line item in your development budget which tells you whether or not you can make this transaction work? Ultimately, the real estate transaction has to stand on its own head. And the answer is land. So City of Vienna figured out a long time ago, look, if we invest in the land and take the land out of the equation, we can make affordable housing work. So that's lesson number 1 that we are learning now through the hard way, that how to leverage our land, whether it's county of land or the county buys certain piece of land and puts it out for development for affordable housing. Second thing that City of Vienna friends figured out pretty fast, that concentration of poverty does not work. It's not a good social model, which we are doing now. We were forced or we are doing it by choice now. We are trying to disperse all of our affordable housing, which we are doing in Montgomery County for a long time, among all jurisdictions. We have 5 districts in Montgomery County. So we want to make sure that it's not just one area of Montgomery County where people finger point, oh, that's where low-income population lives. So our friends from Austria figured that out a long time ago. Third thing that they figured out, that you need a dedicated funding in order to make the deals work. Because ultimately the deals have to cancel out. Whether you take the land out of the equation or you are paying for the land, the deal has to pay for itself. So in their model, the employee or the resident pays some portion of their income towards social housing. Now, I must say, this is my first week in Montgomery County. Up until last Friday, I was working with Fairfax County doing housing. So, but this discussion is very timely. So whether it's Fairfax County or Montgomery County, I consider them as sister counties with similar issues, high cost areas. We need dedicated funding for when it comes to affordable housing, so that we can either contribute land or we can pay for the land to make it affordable, which our friends in Austria figured out a long time ago. And then they also figured out something else, which we always strive for, whether it's Fairfax County or Montgomery County, it's the same thing. It's the quality of construction. When you drive by our properties in Montgomery County or properties in Fairfax, and please excuse me if I'm bringing Fairfax because I worked there for a long period of time, so I may bring in Fairfax as just to give example. But whether you are driving in Montgomery County or elsewhere in Fairfax County, you will see same construction quality. You won't be able to tell this is where low-income people live, and that's not what we want. We don't want a stigma attached to affordable housing, which our friends from Austria figured out a long time ago. So in terms of lessons learned, these are the things which we are learning now, which our friends have learned a long time ago. Now I'm going to talk in general, then I'll just give you my summary comments on this slide. There are some other slides, but in the interest of the time, I'm going to just summarize everything. When it comes to housing, housing supports counties' plan for economic success. There is general deficit in housing supply. It's not just affordable housing. And when we create affordable housing, besides providing housing to a family and put that family on the path of economic success, it also helps the county in attracting businesses. Because if I'm a business and I want to relocate in Montgomery County, and thanks Matt for starting the work in Fairfax County and Montgomery County, but if I'm a business locating whether it's Fairfax or Montgomery, this is what I will see where my employees are going to live. I don't want that I hire someone today and then a year later, either that employee has to move 30, 40 miles away from the job to get affordable housing or just quits. That's not what I want. So if I want to attract businesses and want them to stay there, affordable housing is very important. And this has been proven in several studies that when we do affordable housing, it's not only putting the family on the path of success, it's less stress for children, it's better mental stability for everyone in the family. And these are just the facts. This is not just me talking here. So, Matt mentioned, and before that Hans mentioned about a couple of tools that we use. There's no silver bullet when it comes to affordable housing. We put everything in the kitchen sink. I've been involved in affordable housing since 1992, and I've not seen even a single transaction where I did not have 4, 5, 6, maybe 8 layers of financing to make it work. So Matt introduced the concept of your development budget and how much you can qualify in the first mortgage, getting a loan from the bank or from the state. And then there's always that delta. This is also especially good for the students to hear. The delta, and that's we call gap financing. These are some of the tools that we use to fill that gap in that real estate transaction. We have local funds which we call housing initiative funds. Matt mentioned about the federal tax credits and state programs, so I'm not going to go into those details. Then in Montgomery County, we also have pilots, payment in lieu of taxes. We negotiate these agreements based on the transaction need. And then we have something called right of first refusal or ROFR. So if we have a property with 4 or more units, we can step in and if the property comes for sale and match that contract. Or we can leverage that ROFR to enter into a rental agreement with you upfront as a developer if you give us certain units for lower income population. The big push in the county is to serve people at about 50% of AMI, 30% of AMI, while we continue to serve folks up to 120% of AMI in our programs, because that's the population which is hard to serve and no one wants to make those deals work. That's where we step in with our toolbox. Hey, if you're providing housing for low-income families, maybe we can do something from our toolbox. Then you heard about MPDUs. In Montgomery County, we follow inclusionary zoning. So based on, if you have a property and you're developing more than 20 units, give and take 12.5% are MPDUs. This is one of good ways to create affordable housing for low to moderate income population. And then we also have homeownership programs, where we are currently participating with the Housing Authority in Montgomery County and also with the state, where they match our money and loan our money as a down payment assistance program so that we can create homeownership, which you heard from Matt. In Montgomery County, just to give you some idea, we are about 1.1 million strong. Montgomery County is 400 square miles in area. We have about 126,000 rental units, and of which about, I would say, 51% of the renters of those 126,000 are cost overburdened, which means that they're paying more than 30% of their AMI towards the rent. About 26% of our home owners are cost burdened. So these are some of the tools that we use to make things affordable. Are we there yet? No, we have a very long road to travel on. That said, I see light at the end of the tunnel. Now, we as a community are focusing on this issue. We need about 50,000 additional units in the next 12 to 15 years, and majority of them will be needed for low and moderate income tenants. With the focus on affordable housing now, with our political support which we already have in Montgomery County, with dedicated funding, with policies and programs, I think we can make a big push towards affordable housing. So thank you very much for listening to me. If you have any questions for me, please reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions.
Awesome, one slide guy. Very nice, efficient. So I believe we have some time yet for questions and answers. Yes? Can I open the floor for some questions? Yes, Hans, please.
Quick question, is the tax local for Vienna or is it national for us?
This is a national tax, yes. In all 9 provinces, they pay this national tax, and then the money gets to the lands. Yes.
So I understand about a third of the country's population lives in the city of Vienna, is that correct? That's what I read in your book, I think maybe I got it wrong. So the whole country...
Vienna is 1,000,009 inhabitants, and Austria has 8,000,009.
So but it's a national tax. Less than a fourth.
It's a national tax, yes.
That's very helpful. So it's a...
But the Länder, the provinces, have the opportunity to give more money to the social housing than they get from this fund.
So Vienna is not the only province that does social housing, it's a national policy.
Vienna sometimes pays more, yes, than this from this fund. This is very important.
And then how much land does Vienna own? Do you own all, what share of the land within the city?
It's not easy to say what all, but the Bond Fonds has 2.8 million square meters, but this is only this, acres. Nein, 2,8 Millionen. 2.8 million square meters has the worn for, but that's not all. There are many feet what we have for historical reasons in our property. Yes, that's, I don't know how much this is. But the Monfort always buys new land, and sometimes we lose some land just if we don't need it. Yeah, so, but it's enough, I would say.
Yes, stand up and yell.
Okay. I have a question about the affordability for the new housing plan that you mentioned. So, what I've noticed is that, like, historically, just giving money to people who are developing housing doesn't actually fix a housing problem. The affordability, the 40-year affordability term that you mentioned sounded like pretty promising. So I was wondering if you could just talk about that a little more, or how, like, where the accountability is going to be on people to keep the rent rates low.
Sure. So that's a lot of what our department at the state level does, and every state has a housing finance agency that does this. So that's all regulated by, in exchange for the tax credits, the developers agree to keep rents affordable for 40 years. So they can, at the end of that 40-year period, they can sell the property. What happens a lot of times is that because we have a soft debt layer, it is somewhat prohibitive to benefit from that. So I don't know that I would characterize the tax credit program as this great revenue generator for developers or even for owners. You know, there is subsidy that goes into it. In exchange for that, rents are kept low. So, you know, the cash flow out of these deals is very minimal to the owners and investors. The value is in the tax credit that they can then sell in the market. But I think what's really interesting is, you know, I'm kind of struck by the idea that we're fighting the market. You know, we are doing 4,000 units a year in the state of Maryland through this program. You know, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's say, 60,000 units in the state of Maryland that are under affordable housing restrictions like this. Well, in Montgomery County, you said there are 120,000 rental units, give or take.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how many there are. I should probably know this, but I don't know exactly how many there are in the state of Maryland. But we're a drop in the bucket. You know, and in Vienna, what you see is that because so much of the housing stock is in a way sort of rent controlled, is affordable, is social. You said it puts pressure on the market because now there's competition. You know, the other thing about, I was really struck by the idea of, you know, we require that people have lower incomes to live in affordable housing. You know, we think that we're serving lower income families and the poor. But in Vienna, it sounds like you don't have that restriction. And so you have all different people and all different, you're affecting the demand for that social housing. And so you're setting the market. The social housing in Vienna seems to be setting the market and the rental rates. And what we keep doing in America is, because we're not investing nearly enough in it, because of, you know, well, we could probably talk for another couple of hours or days or months about exactly why in our history, but we're fighting the market forces. And so everything that we do in affordable housing development is all about sort of carving out a little piece. You know, well, how can we help, you know, 70 more families over here and 100 over there? And that's it. It doesn't really, it's not a large enough effect to really move the market or, you know, change the perception about it. Hope that helps. I don't know if that was your question, actually.
Hi there. Thank you for the information you guys have delivered today. It's very insightful. And I have a question about the right of first refusal. My first question is, how do you ensure that the renters actually know that they have this right? Are they told about this as part of the process? And the second one, because if they don't know, then they might just lose access. And the second one is, when they're given that first bid by the person who owns the housing unit, how how do you ensure that they can actually afford that? Because if they can't afford what the bid is that they have to pay to stay or purchase the unit, then effectively it goes on and it gets put into the market. So those are my 2 questions.
Let me start with a speak with my hands. So your first question was, how do we market our right of first refusal? So when we close our transaction, we make sure that the developer knows that there's a right of first refusal in place, whether the tenants are able to buy it, because DC's right of first refusal is different from our right of first refusal. But in our right of first refusal in Montgomery County, we can step in as a county to purchase that property. So irrespective of whether or not the tenants are able to put the financing together, because if you compare our right of first refusal with DC, in DC, the tenants can delegate their right to a developer, they can come in and acquire the property. That's not the case in Montgomery County. However, we can step in as a county, which we have done beautifully before, whether we partner with our housing authority to acquire the unit. We were successful in several properties. So we always have that right.
And so, but if they don't know about it, then they won't contact you to step in.
Well, when a property, and my colleagues can jump in, Frank Demarais from our agency, who is the deputy director, and I have Lisa Schwartz as a portal housing manager. When we close a transaction, and when property comes for sale, then we do notify our tenants at the time that they have this option to purchase this property. So there's a marketing tool which is involved in all of this to notify the tenants. Now, to help them, whether or not they are able to successfully put a financing package together, we can step in as the county and purchase that property.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. We're going to take a 10-minute coffee break. If you want to ask your question directly to the person as they're drinking coffee, that would be the way to go. So please stick around. We'll see you in 10 minutes.